Okay, so you know how sometimes you feel like you're just getting a handle on things, especially with tech, like self-driving cars?
Yeah, absolutely. It moves so fast.
Exactly. And then, bam, the rules change. It
Yeah.
feels like the ground just shifted under the whole self-driving car world here in the
It
U.S.
really has. There's a new reality as of June 16th, actually. It all stems from this order that NHTSA, that's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, put out back on April 24th.
Right.
And it's basically recalibrating how the U.S. regulates these autonomous vehicles.
A recalibration. Okay, so not just tinkering around the edges. This sounds, well, significant. What's the big push behind this? Why now?
Well, the way it's being presented, especially by the Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, is very much about this global innovation race, specifically calling out China. He's even using these big historical comparisons, like the Wright brothers, the moon landing.
Wow, really playing up the stakes then.
Definitely. The argument is that these new rules are essential for the U.S. to stay ahead, to lead in this whole autonomous tech space.
So it's framed as a national interest thing, a competition. Okay. So what actually changed? What are the nuts and bolts of these new rules?
It breaks down into two main categories, really. First, changes to how crashes have to be reported for vehicles with automation levels 2 through 5.
Okay, reporting.
And second, making it easier, basically expanding access for U.S. companies testing robotaxis.
All right, let's dig into that first one, the crash reporting. What specifically is different now, and why is this causing some, well, discussion?
Okay, so previously you had this 5-day reporting requirement for the really serious stuff involving automated vehicles, levels 2 to 5.
Like fatalities.
Exactly. Fatalities, hospital transports, hitting a pedestrian or cyclist, airbag deployment. And for ADS vehicles, that's levels 3 to 5 if it had to be towed away. That 5-day rule still applies. And there was also a 1-month window for reporting other collisions hitting another car, property offense, whatever, or incidents with damage over, I think it was $1,000. That's also still in place.
So the major incident reporting hasn't changed fundamentally. Where's the actual shift then? What got cut back?
The big change is with level 2 systems. The new rules basically say you generally don't need to report minor property damage incidents anymore for these level 2s.
Minor property damage, like what, door dings?
Yeah, exactly. Door dings in a parking lot, scraping a curb, maybe a really minor fender bender, which is cosmetic damage, that kind of thing.
And level 2.
Yeah.
That's the most common stuff out there, right? Like Tesla's full self-driving, Ford's Blue Cruise.
Precisely. That's the vast majority of systems on the road today that have some level of automation. So yeah, excluding these minor incidents could affect a lot of data points.
And the official reason, I gather, is to cut down on unnecessary burdens for the companies. Sounds like streamlining, less paperwork.
That's the argument. Make it more efficient, less costly to operate.
But I'm guessing there's a but coming.
There definitely is. Critics are saying, hold on. These small incidents, even if they seem minor individually, can add up. Kathy Chase, from Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety, put it pretty bluntly.
What did she say?
She basically said that when you stop collecting data on the small stuff, you lose the breadcrumbs. You lose those little clues that might help researchers spot a pattern early on before something bigger happens.
So the worry is about missing potential safety trends.
Exactly. It comes down to transparency and accountability, like Ms. Chase said. If you don't have the full picture, even the seemingly small details, how can the public really trust that these systems are progressing safely?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Losing early warnings versus efficiency. Okay, now you also mentioned a change about confidential business information. What's that about?
Right, the second key change. Manufacturers can now ask NHTSA to keep 3 specific data points in their crash reports confidential. These were things that used to be disclosed.
Okay, what kind of data points are we talking about?
It's, first, whether the car was actually operating within its design conditions, its operational design domain, or ODD when the crash happened.
Okay.
Second, just a plain language description of what happened in the crash. And third, the specific software version the automated system was running at the time.
And the logic is this protects their secret sauce, their competitive edge.
That's the rationale, yeah. Protecting confidential business information, trade secrets, that kind of thing.
But again, I sense a counter-argument brewing.
Naturally. Safety researchers argue that this specific information is actually a really important window into how these systems perform in the real world.
A window. How so?
It helps independent researchers, even local traffic officials, see if there are patterns, maybe specific situations where a system struggles, or if certain software versions are linked to problems.
Right.
If that data gets hidden behind confidentiality requests, it makes it much harder for anyone outside the company to really assess how safe and reliable a technology is. It kind of limits independent scrutiny, you know?
It really does feel like walking a tightrope, doesn't it? Innovation versus, well, knowing what's actually going on. Okay, let's shift to that third big change you mentioned, making things more competitive for U.S. companies. How does that work?
Yeah, this one's interesting. There was this kind of imbalance in the old rules. Foreign companies could actually bring in small numbers of test vehicles that didn't meet all U.S. safety standards, maybe prototypes without normal controls, that sort of thing.
For testing purposes.
Right, for testing.
Yeah.
But U.S. companies, because their prototypes were often seen as closer to being actual production cars, had to go through a more complicated waiver process.
That does sound a bit uneven.
It could be. Some U.S. companies even ended up doing some of their early testing overseas, partly because of that regulatory difference, which isn't ideal, especially for smaller startups, maybe.
So what do the new rules do about that?
They basically extend a similar, easier pathway for homegrown U.S. prototypes, specifically for research and demonstration purposes.
Oh.
The stated goal, according to the memo that came with the order, is to boost automotive innovation here in the U.S. The hope is it leads to more domestic jobs, maybe helps speed up projects like Tesla's Cybercab or other robotaxi fleets being developed here.
So smoothing the road for early development,
Mm-hmm.
but just for testing and demos, not for selling fleets to the public yet.
Exactly. It's limited to research and demonstration for now. Commercial fleets, once they're ready for wider deployment, would still face, fuller safety reviews.
Got it. And people in the industry seem to like this change. I think you mentioned John Bozzella from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation.
Yeah, he basically argued that the lack of a clear federal framework before was actually holding things back. His point was that without consistent rules, it was harder for developers, investors, everyone involved to really move forward and unlock the potential of the technology.
Okay, so we're seeing these clear tensions merge, right? On one side, you've got the push for faster innovation, cutting red tape, leveling the field for U.S. players.
Right.
And on the other side, real concerns about potentially losing valuable safety data, less transparency, maybe rushing things a bit. How does this all fit into the bigger picture of regulating AVs?
Well, it's worth remembering there's been this push for a while now from both sides of the aisle politically to get away from this patchwork of different state laws.
Yeah, that seems confusing.
It can be. So groups like the Autonomous Vehicle Industry Association have been calling for a clear federal framework. And Secretary Duffy is definitely framing these new rules as a step towards that kind of national standard. He talks about ushering in a golden age of transportation.
High hopes. And hovering over all of this, as you mentioned earlier, is the competition with China.
Absolutely. That context seems crucial. There's a very clear awareness of China's manufacturing strength, their big lead already in electric cars, and their huge ambitions for autonomous driving, too. You can almost feel the sense of urgency in the administration's announcements about needing to keep the U.S. competitive.
It really puts these rule changes in a different light. Now, just quickly, because we've been throwing around these levels, could we just briefly run through them again, just to make sure everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, good idea. It can get confusing. So, the source material lays out the standard 6 levels. Level 1 is basic driver assistance like cruise control, maybe lane keeping. Driver does most things.
Okay.
Level 2 is partial automation. The car can handle steering and speed control in certain situations, like highway driving. But, and this is key, the driver must stay fully engaged, ready to take over instantly. That's your Tesla autopilot Ford Blue Cruise zone.
Right, the main focus of that reporting chain.
Exactly. Then level 3 is conditional automation. The car can manage most driving tasks under specific conditions, and the driver can potentially take their attention away, but needs to be ready to intervene when the system requests it.
A step up.
A step up, yeah. Level 4 is high automation. The car can drive itself completely within a defined area or set of conditions, a geofenced zone, maybe, and doesn't need a human driver to be ready to jump in within those limits. Think robo-taxis in certain cities.
Okay.
And finally, level 5 is full automation. The dream, basically. The car can drive itself anywhere, anytime, under all conditions, no human needed at all. We're not there yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. That context is helpful. So wrapping this all up then, these new U.S. rules are really trying to do a few things. ease reporting burdens, especially for those level 2 systems and minor incidents, give companies more leeway to protect what they see as confidential crash data, and streamline testing for US-based prototypes. And the backdrop is this intense global competition, mainly with China, pushing for faster innovation.
That seems to be the driving force, yes.
But, and it's a big but, these changes definitely spark debate about whether we're dialing back safety oversight too much or losing transparency that could be important for building public trust.
That's the core tension, absolutely, finding that balance.
It really leaves you thinking, doesn't it? As we finish up this deep dive, what is the right balance here? How much emphasis should be on speed and innovation versus making sure everything's demonstrably safe and transparent? And thinking about the data, what information do you think is absolutely critical for us, the public, and for regulators to track as these cars become more common on our roads? It's definitely something to mull over as this technology keeps rolling forward.